Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Story number 1. Mayonnaise, written by Nora and Naya Toast. Grok sat on his throne made of the skulls of his past conquests. On a screen in the far end of the room played the deaths of thousands of worlds. Grok nodded in satisfaction. The footage ended, then was replaced by footage of his next target. It was a small planet. It was orbited by a lone moon and composed of 2/3 water. "Data," Grok muttered in the ship's AI. "Give me all the data." At once, Grok almost fell off of his throne as the AI interpreted his request rather liberally. "Why the hell did I need the entire history of this planet beamed into my brain?" he yelled. There was no response. Slowly, he began to understand what he was processing. He smiled, showing 2 rows of jagged teeth. "Ha! Nothing but kittens," he laughed, the sound echoing across the room. "This conquest shall be trivial." Suddenly, a klaxon sounded in the room. The AI had decided that a visitor was needed. In the center of the room, Grok watched as a 2-legged creature materialized. It yawned as it dropped a can with blood printed on the side of it, and then scratched at the appendage at the rear of one of its limbs. Grok was incensed. "I am Grok, the destroyer of worlds, subjugator of our countless species. Identify yourself, interloper." His voice was loud enough to rattle bone. The human, dressed in underwear and a stained dressing gown, looked around, appearing confused. He replied. I'm Dave. Damn, I may have drunk too much. What is this place?" Dave's eyes, half-lidded, yawned, a piece of drool hanging from his mouth. He stuck his hands into his pockets. One hand re-emerged, holding a spoon. "We human, I am your conqueror. You beauty race does not... Do you not realize who you stand before? How importunate! I should cut you down where you stand. What in the 10 rings are you doing?" Grok roared, the room shaking from the baritone of his voice. Dave appeared to ignore him, swaying from the effects of the empty can and from the movement of the floor. From his other pocket, he pulled out a jar. He muttered. "Weird dream." Dave stumbled a few steps forward until he banged his shin on a table, though he did not react to the pain, then glanced around the room, taking in the bones adorning the walls. Weird. "Human!" Grok's fury was reaching new heights. A vein on his forehead bulged. "Do you not realize the seriousness of the situation you're in?" He jumped to his feet as he grabbed a sword that had been lying on top of the pile of skulls. Dave yawned and replied, "I'm getting a snack, Gok." He proceeded to unscrew the lid of the jar, dipped in the spoon, and lift out a portion of its contents. The contents jiggled, wet and glistening with fat, as Dave lifted it to his mouth. "Human, what are you consuming?" Grok, discombobulated at Dave's actions, took a step forward and strained his eyes in order to read what was written on the side of the jar. "Maru," Dave mumbled, then swallowed, coughed, and tried again. "Mayo." At this, Grok took a step away from the human. Grok realized, somewhere in the massive amount of data his AI had pulled, that there were hours of videos on how this mayo substance was made. His eyes widened from a mixture of shock and horror. "Impossible! My data from your world indicates that mayonnaise should only be ingested as part of a healthy, managed diet." His sore arm was pointed towards Dave, but his grip on the weapon was slack, and his arm was unsteady. Suddenly, he was being flooded with images of mayonnaise factories and eating challenges. Dave rolled his eyes. "It's 3 a.m., Grok. You try and make a sandwich at this time." "Dave, my name is Grok. What's a sandwich? At once his mind was filled with images of sliced bread. This did not answer his question. Whatever, Groot. Grok shook his head in disbelief at this alien Dave, who rather than showing the customary fear, instead insisted on eating another tablespoon of mayonnaise. Such digestive power, Grok said. The sentence trailed off as Dave dipped the spoon into the jar, a third, then a fourth, and then a fifth time. Not all humans as strong as you, Dave. Dave shrugged. Dunno, we got some interesting food. You should Google surstrumming. Despite Dave's inebriated state, his pronunciation of the Swedish word was, rather inexplicably, perfect. Had a pal that ate a packet of cinnamon once. Does that count? Grok's mouth fell open in shock. The mere mention of surstrumming had instantly pulled images of humans eating it into his mind. Incredible! Dave, I wish to visit your planet, not as a conqueror, but as a friend. I have underestimated your species' ability to produce warriors as strong as yourself. Sure. I guess. Dave clutched his stomach. Gawk! I'm going to be sick. He glanced around the room, saw that there was no bin to be found amongst the skulls and general viscera, which left him with but one option. So he threw up, covering the nearby table in a mayonnaise-infused bath. Grok jumped backwards to save his clawed feet from the splash and put the claw on his face in exasperation. Dave, that table was forged using the heat of a dying sun. It is irreplaceable. Dave, still clutching his stomach, groaned, sorry, Grop. I think I've seen a similar one in IKEA. Grok raised an eyebrow. Then who has got what? Which star system is this IKEA in? It's 3 or 4 a.m., Gut. They're closed. At this, Grok screamed in frustration and threw his sword so hard that it jammed itself into the nearest wall. I regret ever thinking of conquering your planet, you mayonnaise-infested fiends! End of story. Story number 2. Iron Jailers, written by British Tea Company. If there was a hell, then it was Mount Ferra, where molten iron poured from its mouth. If there was a devil, it would be Varrock, molten iron pouring from his mouth. If there was such a thing as a hellstorm, it would be a barrage that would be headed for the mountain, magic missiles cast by archmages who could level the walls of a city with but a few words. Alchemical brews that would be toxic to all forms of life. Amidst the arcane, there was the mundane arrows and bolts. Countless thousands of them flew at the mountain side by side. Varrock would be impossible to miss. He stood taller than the tallest castle, and the molten iron pouring from his mouth made him look like a mountain of fire in his own right. The barrage struck true. Arrows shattered against his iron-like scales. Enchantments and hexes exploded off of his hide, only to do so pitifully little. The force of God's hammer came crashing down upon the peak of Mount Ferro, and its master threw the devil's fury back. A stream of dragon's breath incinerated anything it touched at a heartbeat. Siege engines literally melted in the wake of his wrath, and even the greatest of armors would be nothing more than paper to the torrent of fire and iron. The besiegers refused to balk. More siege weapons rolled up to the front to shower the dragon with their weapons. Mages, some of who had spent several lifetimes on this forsaken battlefield, spoke the words that would mend their comrades and renew their fighting force. Again and again. God's hammer came crashing down upon the peak. Varrock roared again, perhaps in genuine pain. But his retaliation once again wiped out entire contingents of attackers, their iron bodies melting instantly against his fury. Even in death, they would still serve. Wizards and sorcerers, long having left their mortal bodies, ran around as living armor, ornately decorated to distinguish them. They muttered incantations that would repair their brethren, and, as the souls within caused the armor to flicker back to life, another warrior could be added back into the throngs of the besiegers. This was how it went for decades, for centuries. When they first came here, the mission had been to slay Feck. Now it was clear that they could only hope to contain him, and contain him they would. Though not a single warrior had his original body lived to see the coming of old age. They were still alive after all these years of constantly dying and being reborn. In this hell of duty, every man found brotherhood. They found bonds forged in iron, as eternal as their own souls. They were only human when they came here. The mortal army which Feck had laughed in draconic tongues had its chances of victory. Even now, they were still only human. Feck explained the line of defense that kept him in his mountain. Yes, they were only human. Only a human could have thought of the insanity to bring so much warriors to face against the most powerful being in the world. Only a human could have followed through with the idea of a siege. Only a human could have stepped up to agree to serve for eternity if need be against the greatest evil the world had ever seen. And only a human will fight, day after day, year after year, century after century, only to be knocked down again, returning to life in a body that wasn't his, just to fight again in a battle he knows he could never hope to win. Only a human can do this. As Feck was done catching his breath, he glared down at his mountain. There were still hundreds of thousands of only humans still surrounding his mountain. End of story. The algorithm reckons you should be watching this video next, and I recommend that you should be always watching my video. So, click with energy! And yes, clicking that does help the channel. Thank you very much. I would just quickly like to give thanks to our Tier 5 members: Elithia, Barky, Feudicuel, Meridian117, Cam Maxwell, Caspar Arnholtz, Albarden Gusta, Savage Patch Papa, and Lord Azrakal.